Good morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever time of day it is for you. And welcome to the Lost Souls podcast. I'm Alex coming at you. Well, today is Friday the 13th. And it even happens to fall in October, the month of Halloween. So it's like a match made in hell or something like that. Today, in the spirit of the things that are spooky and unlucky, we're going to be talking about luck. You know what? I kind of changed my mind on the fly. I was going to talk about luck, and I'm sure it'll come up now that I've mentioned it, but I think it's going to be about fear today. Fear is this universal thing. I'm not going to say everybody because I'm sure there are some literal fearless individuals in the world, but those are very few and far between. Most people do experience fear in some way, shape, form, or fashion, and we can't have a discussion, or I can't have a discussion since I'm just talking to myself about fear without touching on all the stuff that makes people uncomfortable. So, fair warning, if, at some point in the future you stumble across this video, I'm about to probably dive into some pretty heavy subject matter, and you may not want to listen to it. Because to start, we're going to be talking about the fear of death. Oh, I'm really going to be able to tie everything together this episode. Anyway. Because that's like the biggest fear people have, right? Like, when you think of being afraid, well, what is it you're afraid of? Are you really that afraid of pain? I mean, yeah, it hurts, and that's something to be afraid of. I guess we'll start there instead. I'll move my way up to dying. A lot of people and the way they move throughout the world is actually a reaction of them trying to avoid something like pain because they are afraid of it, right? And, I go back to dating a lot and like relationships between men and women because it pops up a lot. But men and women are both scared of each other for different reasons, and that actually like severely affects the way they interact today. And I'm going to start with the women's side, and then I'm going to move to the guy side, because I do try to, give some kind of equal footing in these, even if it is going to be inherently biased. But, to a woman in the dating scene, they're afraid of a man, hurting them, but usually physically, but also emotionally, because they do end up with guys, because, anecdotally, right? I'm a man, I've never been scared to walk at night. Nothing big. I'm like 6 foot. I'm like 200, a little over 200 pounds. I, believe I can take care of myself in a fight, even though I'd probably get my ass kicked. I'd still be willing to do it just for the sake of my pride. But I've never been scared to just walk around at any time of day at night. Even like with people who are much bigger than me, I realize oh hey, because I think I'm in a nice size to where it's like if you're smaller than me, I got kind of an edge, and if you're bigger than me, well then I know how to throw you to the ground, right? Because the bigger they are, the harder they fall is an actual thing for a reason, If you're bigger than me, you're going to be slower than me, and I'm strong enough to where I can take, because the only thing you got to take to throw somebody around is one of their legs. Like you take one of their legs and they're done for. You can throw it to the ground, and you just got to be faster enough to grab it and get it. So I don't really fear physical altercations, and to a point I don't fear even people with weapons, because yeah, it could hurt, but I also we'll get into that later. That's another discussion for later on in the episode. But I don't fear. To women, walking around at night is a very scary experience, and my eyes were open to this at one time. It was been about 4 years, I guess, when I was attending Virginia Tech, and a friend of mine, a project friend of mine, we were on a project. It's not important. She asked me to walk her to her car because it was dark out, and she had to get something out of her car, and she didn't want to go alone. I was like, yeah, sure, because honestly, I thought I kind of liked her, because she gave me positive attention, and to me that's enough. She was cute and gave me positive attention. To me that's enough to develop an attraction, but I'm told that that's an unreasonable reason to do stuff like that. But anyway, so I walked her to her car, and we had this conversation because she was like, "Yeah, I'm just kind of scared," and to me, I'm like, "Really?" And then, I guess if I was a much smaller human being who had more trouble fending for myself, and I was a woman, I'd probably be a lot more scared walking around at night. And so, but the idea of this fear that women perceive on behalf of men, like, oh, I'm going to be attacked, somebody's going to hurt me, somebody's going to kidnap me, somebody's going to, assault me in all the different ways. I don't, you know, that's a fear that permeates within the minds of women. And that's the kind of fear that a lot of women have toward men, because they're like, well, men are savages, men are animals, and men will hurt somebody. And like a lot of men will. Because like there's a difference between men and women is you don't really hear about women going out and committing acts of violence, as opposed you do hear about men doing that, right? And and don't get me wrong, it's not like that's true across the board, but it's mostly true that like men are predominantly, participating in acts of violence, because women just participate in other acts of inflicting suffering on other people that aren't violence, and I'll get into that in here in a second. But and for that reason, women have this call and this cause to be afraid, and that's part of the reason that guys like me can't get dates, because the women that we also have to make a woman feel extremely safe, and it's not like a level of safe to where it's like, oh, well, they're going to give you a shot and then they'll go from there and they'll evaluate it along the way. No. Women start from a baseline of I am scared of you, and you have to convince me otherwise to even get an ounce of my time. And for a man like me who's larger in stature, I have a more intimidating physical presence just as a state of existing as I am. And so I have to, in order for me to even make a woman feel safe in the first place, it's like something I have to overcome. Or you don't think about like large physical appearances necessarily being detractions from or hindrances to existing, because I do get to be over 6 foot tall, but it really works out that way. And like there's a reason that there are a lot of these girls who like skinny white dudes. Why do girls like skinny white dudes? I look at it and I'm like, oh, it's because those guys are like like guardrails on the side of the road, and a strong breeze would knock them over. You don't have to be afraid of them because they couldn't hurt a fly if they wanted to. Maybe yeah, I'm gonna be real with everybody for a second. Got no idea where I was headed with that. Maybe it was something about an intimidating presence is calming to a woman, and so that's why smaller men seem to be. I don't know. I don't have any idea where I was going with that, even slightly. But it's like this whole weird dynamic, right? Because it's like, well, we can't be scared and we want to feel safe, and it's like, well, actually, you feel safer on the dude who couldn't protect something if he had to, because people have built up this society in our head to where, well, there's not really ever any danger, and if it is danger, then it's like outside of any control that we have, and so we don't actually need to worry about trying to protect ourselves, because the fact that it happens at all is the issue, instead of actually taking a stance of like, oh, well, bad things happen, and we need to be prepared in case bad things happen. And if you look at it from that perspective, having like, for a woman to have like a boyfriend or a husband who is like stronger physically is like a bigger protection mechanism, because like if somebody tries to start shit, like who's gonna whoop whose ass? But I guess I digress about that, because there's an entire other layer to things women have to be afraid of. Like they gotta watch out for each other at parties, because there are guys in this world who like to drug women and take advantage of them that way. And those guys, I don't even know what the appeal is there, if I'm being honest, because it's like, well, the only thing guys care about is sex. But it's like, you realize that when it comes to like sex, having sex with women, and this is like my view on it as like a virgin who has no sexual experience. So I guess maybe this is the reason that I have no sexual experience. I look at it this way, because it's not about, like, getting my dick in a pussy, right? That's not the reason that I'm looking for sex. It's about like the connection and the like sense of ease, or not ease, but what's the word I'm looking for here? Intimacy, maybe? No, it's maybe intimacy is the closest word I can think of right now. But it's about that, closeness with somebody that comes as a result of, because like in a guy's mind, like if you have sex with somebody, you're like close to people, like you're close to somebody, right? Like they've let you in pretty much, and like that's what you're after. It's not about like a race to see like how fast can I get inside of you. Although to the guys that to me it's a thing of pride, right? Because that's like what I'm looking for, I guess. I don't know, but I don't see how guys have any pride or dignity in themselves. And they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna stick like fucking drugs in girls' drinks, and then wait for them to pass out, and then get mine, right? And it's like, yeah, I guess it feels good. I wouldn't know personally, but like that seems like a shitty reason to go out like that. Or maybe they're like I'm not trying to defend them at all, but they're like, oh, this is the only way, right? And it's like, maybe that recontextualizes it. It doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't like excuse it or say like, oh, well, it's all right, because it's not. Like, you shouldn't stoop to that level. But I don't know. I need to stop rambling about shit like this. But the point I was going to move on to next was that it's not just women who are afraid of men. And you might be like, oh, really? Like, men are afraid of women? How the hell do you... Because, while men are the physically intimidating presence, a woman can fucking emotionally devastate a man with the snap of her fingers, pretty much. And I don't... Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Because I'm not sure how women feel about what it's like to be rejected. I'm not sure how many women feel the sting of rejection, especially not continual rejection, right? Or like ridicule, right? Because like I've been in a situation to where I'm genuinely trying, or I might genuinely try to, make a very real effort and trying my hardest to try to make like a relationship happen. And the thing that I get met with on the other side of that is people making fun of me and ridiculing me, including, unknown to me, I guess I was trying to ignore it, the woman I was, trying to pursue, right? To where, like, you're made a laughing stock just for giving shit a shot. And, that's the fastest way for me to check out real fast. Like, people tell me I don't put myself out there anymore. It's like, no, because when I do, I'm met with nothing but negative response, and I'm not doing that anymore. But the point is that men can be scared of women too, because like even the kindest of like rejections fucking stings worse than you can imagine. And only guys know what I'm talking about. Even they're like, it's not you, it's me, and blah blah blah. Or like because they're all excuses, right? That's the issue. Is that everything a woman says about like, oh, I'm just not looking for a relationship right now. Yeah, and if a guy that you were looking for a relationship showed up tomorrow, you would not hesitate for a second, right? Because that's not what you're just giving an excuse and a reason instead of actually just addressing the fact that like, oh, hey, like, because what you're actually saying is, I'm not interested in you. But you're like, that would hurt to actually say it. And it's like, it hurts when you don't say it too. Like hiding behind some nicety so you feel better about it at the end of the day doesn't actually change what you said or what you've done. It actually is the same exact thing. And let's all just stop fooling ourselves and just say what we fucking mean so that everybody can be starting from the same page. So you don't get to walk away like, oh, I was a nice individual and I put him down nicely because I said blah 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 and I came up with this blah 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 phrase, and instead of just saying, no, I don't like you, and Perhaps giving somebody a fucking reason why, because like, how else are we supposed to grow? Because like, this is like a regular situation that happens to where it's like, oh well, I say, I mean, maybe I'm a shithole for asking in the first place, but like, I got turned down, and I was like, why? Because in my mind, because like, what I find attractive, like, I guess I have a certain type, right? And so, in my mind, it's like, well, this is what I like, and you're the type of person I like. And so I could probably have some really interesting insight about what I should do better next time if I could be told why it didn't work out this time. But in a girl's mind, that's not how it works. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. That's not what your actions say, right? Because like, you don't simultaneously reject somebody and there not be an issue somewhere, right? Even if it's something that people have no control over or whatever, because at least then you have an idea. But my point is, this hurts for men too, right? And so this is also like, I think, a fear on behalf of men, because like, why do you think guys don't ask women out? And I don't blame them. I'm one of the guys. I don't ask women out. You know why? Because I'm not such a fool as to realize that I'm not going to, like, if I thought there was a chance of me not getting rejected, yeah, I would have that optimistic feeling once upon a time. But once you realize, like, hey, like, you're going to get rejected, and that's not even the point of this whole thing. It's like, well, they want you to try so they get to feel good about themselves, and they're like, oh, well, this guy is trying. But, like, there's no point in asking a girl out if you're just going to get rejected. Like, no cap, full stop. There is no point in asking a girl out if you're going to get rejected. And so maybe if women want guys to ask them out more, you should say yes to more dates. And you're like, oh, well, they shouldn't have to say yes to dates and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, if you give a guy a shot, spend like an evening with him, go out to dinner with him, and then at the end of that, you get to be like, yeah, this isn't really for me. Like, we're not feeling it. You get him to experience, like, oh, well, this isn't really going to work. We're not really meshing well together, or like anything like that, right? That's a completely different narrative than just never giving somebody a shot in the first place, right? And don't take the easy way out of being like, well, let's all hang out with friends together, because there's an entire dynamic that you're not going to like understand or be able to tune into to people whenever it's in a group setting, because not all people work well in groups. And when you're in a group with your friends, you're probably going to stick around and stay with your friends and hang out with your friends, and then there's just this dude you kind of invited along or was along for the ride, right? But then you walk away from it like, oh, well, we just didn't work together, and it's like, you didn't even consider that a possibility. Like, anyway, I suppose I digress from that situation. But it's just like, this shit sucks, and then I know I can feel the response from the other side. It's like, you're sitting here equating men being scared of rejection to women being scared of being like very, very violently harmed. And you heard me laugh there, but it's only because that's a coping mechanism for me that I use, right? But like, how dare you equate those two things as somehow equivalent? It's like, well, I've just already explained how men just aren't scared on the level of being physically harmed like women are, but they're much more vulnerable to emotional attack, right? And you might be like, that's not true. Women get hurt just as bad as men do. It's like, it's not about that. Like women tend to be used to it because they're much more social creatures who click together, and it's like, all these mean bitches are out and they're saying all kind of bad shit, and this is like what you grew up with, right? And so you're used to experiencing the emotional turmoil and then recovering from it, right? And so you're much more used to bouncing back from it. But when you get hurt physically, you're like out of commission, and it's like, it hurts really bad because it's not something you got like a real tolerance for, and it's awful, right? It's just awful, right? Like, that's why there's like, well, you should never hit a man, or the man should never hit a woman, because you're much stronger typically than a woman, and you're going to really hurt her, right? But what if the same was true for emotions in men, right? What if you should never hurt a man emotionally? And like, but even just saying that would be a fucking ridiculous notion, right? Because that would mean you don't reject men. right? And you see the uneven equality there, because we're like, and then I hear the feedback, women don't reject men. We try to be nice to them whenever we turn them down. And it's like, being nice to a man isn't the same as not hurting him. You realize you can be kind and hurtful at the same time, right? Like, those aren't mutually exclusive things, and even the kindest of words can sting worse than the sharpest of blades, no matter how well they're put, right? And so what if, that not bouncing back, that extreme hurt, because men can take physical being hurt pretty well. Like, I can take a few licks, like, you want to, like, break a bone. I've had bones broken before. Shit hurts, but I've had bones broken before. It's not, like, the worst thing in the world, right? Like, you can get through it, and I can heal, and I don't actually have to do very much to do that, right? Whereas emotionally speaking, in order for me to, I don't know how to heal emotionally from a lot of this stuff, because some people are like, well, you need to adopt a different way of thinking. Well, no, I have a rigid way of thinking. That's not changing. That's not going to be the solution to emotional availability. Actually, and the only time I've ever heard something which may approximate what it means to heal was a definition I heard from somebody on YouTube. I'm not going to, like, shout people out because it's weird, but like, the message behind it is what resonated with me, and it was about healing from, like, an emotional trauma. And I'm using trauma loosely, because I'm not saying every time you get hurt emotionally it's traumatic, although it can be. To heal from emotional trauma is to experience the opposite of what happened to you, right? And so in that way, to heal from emotional trauma 100%, because emotional trauma is something that is emotions, just by nature of existing, arise because of interactions with other human beings, right? And so to heal from emotional trauma, you necessarily need interactions with other human beings, but it's not enough just to interact with them, right? So let me use myself as an example. Say I get, and I'm not even using, this is still a hypothetical, I don't even have to be, it's hypothetical. Man gets absolutely destroyed, like, turned down in the most brutal fucking way possible. Like, he goes and asks the girl out, and she looks down her nose at him. What makes you think that I would date a sore fucking loser, peasant, poor, ugly piece of trash like you? How dare you speak to me? Right? Turn tail the other way before I have my 13 boyfriends come and kick the shit out of you. All right? Imagine, like, it's a far flung example, but, like, imagine that. Like, imagine how that would feel for a guy for a second. Like, oh, like, I'm a worthless pile of garbage and nobody's ever gonna love me, right? How do you heal from that? Is it real? Are you ever going to reach a point with yourself you're like, well, I'm happy with myself, and it doesn't matter what that woman said or what experiences I have in my life, it'll be okay? No, you're going to heal when you find a woman who's like, I love you, and I those are all bullshit, and I want you in my life, right? But to find that, you necessarily need to rely on other people. Now, herein comes a problem, because you have no control of other people's actions, attitudes, or behaviors. So I guess actions, behaviors are the same thing. You don't. I know there's, like, this certain line of thing. Well, you have limited control over people in your environment, depending on the way you interact. No, you don't. You do not. You know why? Because you do not have control of another person. Just full stop, period, no cap. You do not have control over them. Yeah, I mean, people might not like that or not, and as long as you don't have control over them, you cannot be responsible for what they do in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And if you can't be that, you can't emotionally heal yourself, right? Because I can't just be like, oh, like, I'm hurt and somebody needs to help me, because it's like, well, what you need is something they can't give you, and that's like that just keeps showing up, right? I guess for women it ends up being a little bit different, because they can heal from emotional trauma. Let's say a guy absolutely fucking destroys their feelings. Like, oh, you're a worthless cunt, nobody's ever gonna fucking love you. Well, the only thing a girl has to do is go to one of the other guys in her DMs, and then she gets to feel better. But alright. Although, if a guy gets rejected continually, they're gonna tend to be rejected more, because, I guess a man who's never been in a relationship is seen as lower status and value than a man who has, because somebody else has already decided, like, oh, he's good enough, right? He's been vetted, Whereas a guy who's never been vetted is like, oh, he's unsafe and nobody needs to go around him, and it ends up being how that shit works, I think. I don't know exactly. But, and maybe I'm just an exception. I feel emotional pain at a much deeper level than everybody else does, and it's completely different, and I'm blowing things completely out of proportion, because to me, emotional pain is like fucking, like, I'd rather you break bones than have to deal with emotional pain. Like, I would literally rather get broken bones. I'd rather be beaten with a baseball bat. I'd rather I'd rather have any physical injury over having to actually deal with deep hurtful emotions. And maybe that's not right of me, because I imagine if you asked a woman that question, it'd be the exact opposite. They'd be like, well, I'd rather deal with, the heavy emotional damage than to deal with, somebody coming and breaking my leg or something. Like, I imagine those would be reversed, although I don't know that. I haven't started a poll to say, what would you rather have your heart and soul ripped out of your chest, temporarily and have to heal from it, or have to heal from a broken leg? That asking it that way would be a loaded question, but I imagine that there'd be like a gendered split, a gendered kind of split. I don't want to say a necessarily gendered split, but like a gendered kind of split that falls like, it's where men would generally be like, give me the physical pain, and women would be like, give me the emotional pain, just because men are probably better equipped to deal with physical pain and women better equipped to deal with emotional pain. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong, or maybe, but to me, there's probably a reason that there seem to, like, fields like therapy are largely dominated by women, right? There aren't many male therapists, even though they do exist. Like, it's not like there aren't there. There aren't very many of them, because men tend to not be able to deal with the emotions like that as well as women do. But then there comes another issue, because what happens when a man goes to therapy, right? Because there's like this whole method and reasoning that women have for dealing with emotions, and for women it works somehow. But what if that isn't how men get better? Like, what if men actually need action? Because to me, it seems like a lot of women can just talk out their problems, like, emotionally, and feel better. Like, oh, I released that, and oh, it's so much better. But for a man, for me as a man, the reason that I end up feeling emotional issues in the first place are because the situations and things that have happened in my life. And I know it's the same for women, but I'm not going to feel better about those situations until I experience an outcome that is not that, right? I guess that's healing from emotional trauma by the very definition I just gave. But like, until those things are different, I'm not going to feel any better about it, right? Because you can say, take me for another example, because I'm doing that pretty easily. Oh, you loser, you've never been in a relationship, nobody's ever going to love you, right? Say that. How do I heal from that? Is there going to be, because the success of that is defined by whether or not I find a partner. That line of thinking is going to continue and permeate until there's evidence put in front of my face. And I don't mean words, because words are cheap. I mean actual, physical evidence, like a girl, showing real interest in pursuing and, developing a relationship that ends up in a romantic kind of way. Until that happens, there isn't going to be resolution to the conflict in my head, because I don't have any fodder or anything to combat that with. I can sit here all day and be like, that's just not true. People are going to love you, and you're not lost cause, and, blah, 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 blah. But that's argument without backing. There's a reason you don't go to, a scientific debate without evidence, because, when my mind tries to construct that kind of reality, there is no evidence back here to support it. Because, there's a reason that I think that way, right? Because of my experiences. And without there actually being, a real propping up of the counter arguments, because I've got all of this reason, all these reasons to why I could be worthless and not, and be, never have love or whatever. I can come up with 10 off the top of my head right now, But when I try to combat that, it's like there is no evidence there, because I've never experienced anything to make me think that, you know, because, you know, I had my world shattered when I realized what people talking even meant, and then like how I've never talked to anybody, and how, oh, well, you know, women will try to talk to you if they're interested, and it's like, oh, well, women have never tried to talk to me. What does it mean? Oh, no woman's ever been interested in you. Oh. Well, that's cool, right? I shouldn't lose hope, though. You know? I have no reason to think that I'll ever find somebody, and no woman has ever showed interest in actually pursuing or wanting to be with me, but, you know, I shouldn't lose hope. To me, that sounds ridiculous, because there is no evidence to back that up. There is no, like on a spiritual level, like, it might be a little different, but on a real level, like, no. And I guess this can tie into, like, the whole fear of missing out, right? Because I experience it all the time. Like, I fear I'll never, you know, have a family. I fear I'll never have my own child. I fear I'll never date. I fear that by the time that I'm seen as even a valuable asset or option to women, they're gonna, like, it's gonna be down the road to the point where it's like the only women left are either married or not married. The only women left are like single mothers who have had their children and now just want to continue the family they already have, when maybe I want to start a family or have my own children, and that's just not going to be on the table anymore because it's been so long. Like they went out and they had their fun while they were young and they got knocked up, or, you know, maybe they're in a relationship where it actually happened naturally and they chose to have it and then things fall apart. But it doesn't change the fact that women are going to, like, the older that people get, the more that women are going to, like, navigate toward mothership, because it's like that, how many women just want to be moms or want to be moms, right? And so the longer they're alive, the more likely it is they're going to be mothers. That's just how it works. That's like the stage of life development, right? And maybe I, don't want to be with a mother, but then, like, as I move up in age, there are less and less women that are not mothers that I'm going to be able to, see or be with or interact with or date or what have you. Well, simultaneously, it's also, like, frowned upon for me to, like, try to pursue younger women. It's like society. It's like, oh, that's bad. That's like, you don't know. No, don't know. That's, controlling, manipulative, blah, 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 blah. Right? Even if it's by just me having, like, these things that I've always wanted in a relationship, and this is the only way that I'll ever be able to, like, achieve those things, doesn't matter because I need to stick with women my age. And, I'm rejecting that notion, even if the rest of society doesn't think so, because, to me, that's the only way to keep hope alive. And I'm not saying however you want to sound it, but, like hope dies, and it's dying pretty soon, if the only women that I have available to me are women my age. Like, hope dies. Hope's running out fast, and I can't just live a life without hope. And nobody can do that. That ends up putting you in the ground faster. And I guess, speaking of which, I want to change gears to fear of death, right? Because that was the thing I was going to start earlier. Because it's what everybody's really afraid of at the end of the day. You're afraid of dying. You're afraid of dying and your life being meaningless, and you never have done anything with it, and you're never leaving anything behind, and never getting to experience the things you want to experience or do the things you want to do, right? And, like, everybody's scared of it because nobody knows what happens when we die. We all have our ideas and theories about what happens. Like, there are the ideas of, heaven and hell existing, and this is what happens to your soul, and blah, blah, blah. There's the idea of reincarnation, which I tend to, prescribe to, I think ascribe is the word for it. I'm not going to look it up because I don't feel like it. I tend to believe in reincarnation of the soul just because, it's a feeling. Like, it's a belief. It's not something I have to sit here and justify with, a long-winded response. Yeah, I know. Big loud. So you got pick up all of a sudden. But at the same time, I've also sat here and rambled. Really, the fear of death is, in my mind, it's not something that should be feared. But it's because of like faith, I guess I have in the universe or whatever. Like, because I mean, to me, it's weird the way people construct and have faith. Because to me, what I have faith in is the universe because it's what surrounds us, right? And the idea of like creation versus evolution, to me, those are the same thing, right? Because what was the method by which we were created? Well, that method was evolution. To me, it's cut and dry. I'm gonna like draw my hand to that, and I'm gonna leave it there. But that contradicts religious texts, which say something different. And even though I could sit here and argue until I'm blue in the face about how, the religious texts don't necessarily not contradict science, because those could be two different realms and two different explanations, ways of existing and through, because there could be the spiritual level and then the creation and how the creation happened in, like, say, the Bible. If you read, believe in the Bible, could have been like a spiritual interpretation of what evolution was the physical phenomena for. But that is blasphemous to Christians. Anyway, I'm gonna stop before I say something that's even more controversial and shitty of me to say than what I've already done. But if you've watched this long, I appreciate it. Just still don't know why, but you go, you do you. You must like my voice or something. But I'm Alex. This has been the Lost Souls podcast, and I'm outie.